that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. Just past 4 o'clock, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Drivers hoping to travel through the port of Dover are facing a second day of severe delays. Although the number of French border staff has improved, Dover authorities say there's still some way to go to clear the backlog. One French politician claims the delays are a result of Brexit, as more checks need to be carried out than before. However, Dover MP Natalie Elphicke says France is responsible.
The French didn't turn up to work as they were expected to do in the numbers that were needed, and that resulted in that traffic gridlock in Dover and that traffic chaos that we saw right across Kent. So the French were responsible for the mess yesterday. I understand that they are now manning the passport controls properly at Dover, which is good news, but it will take some time yet to clear through that traffic backlog.
The World Health Organization has declared monkeypox is now a global health emergency. The organization's Director General warns the global risk to people is moderate, but in Europe, it's high. Today's announcement means the WHO believes a coordinated international response is needed. Rishi Sunak says he'll put the UK on a crisis footing to tackle issues such as inflation if he becomes Prime Minister. Speaking in Grantham, the former Chancellor hit back at tax cuts announced by his rival Liz Truss, warning they could lead to further inflation. He also promised to tackle the NHS backlog, pledging to eliminate one-year waiting times by September 2024.
I'm the candidate in this contest who can say unequivocally the NHS will be safe in my hands. We face the worst NHS winter crisis in decades. Tackling the backlogs is the biggest public service emergency.
Meanwhile, Liz Truss is promising a red tape bonfire of all EU laws retained after Brexit if she becomes Prime Minister. The Tory leadership hopeful says she will implement a review by the end of next year and scrap rules which hinder UK growth. She argues that the measures would encourage business investment, but critics warn it could weaken workers' rights. The body of a man has been found in Essex this morning after a 21-year-old went missing on the hottest day in British history last week. Emergency services had been looking for a man who was last seen in the water close to Clacton Pier on Tuesday. Police say formal identification has not yet taken place, but efforts are being made to contact his family. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's missile strikes on the port of Odessa show it will find ways to renege on yesterday's grain deal. The agreement is supposed to allow the export of grain from Ukraine, easing global food shortages. The country currently has around 20 million tonnes in silos. It follows months of Russia blockading Ukraine's ports in the Black Sea. A pizza delivery driver in the United States has been praised after rescuing 5 people from a burning house. Nick Bostic was driving in Lafayette in Indiana when he saw the property ablaze. He managed to help 4 people escape the flames before going back in to rescue a 6-year-old girl. Incredibly, the pair only sustained minor injuries despite being forced to jump from a first-floor window. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana Akua.
So good afternoon. It is fast approaching 5 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. The professional victim, Prince Harry. Earlier this week, he went on his usual whinging journey at the Nelson Mandela Day UN conference in New York. He talked about poverty, freedom of speech and climate change, none of which he can seriously profess to be in sufferance of. In his speech, he appears to be comparing his struggle for freedom with Nelson Mandela's. The bit about misinformation, it feels like he's talking about himself. What's that got to do with Mandela? Have a listen.
Climate change wreaking havoc on our planet, with the most vulnerable suffering most of all. The few weaponizing lies and disinformation at the expense of the many. And from the horrific war in Ukraine to the rolling back of constitutional rights here in the United States, we are witnessing a global assault on democracy and freedom, the cause of Mandela's life.
I mean, really? From one disastrous speech to another. What is he talking about? Remember the one where he professes he doesn't understand the First Amendment, then proceeds to insult the American people by calling it bonkers, which is odd because it's about freedom of speech, something he's apparently struggling to grapple with now. What a contradiction. No doubt he's regurgitating a load of gobbledygook fed to him by his other half. One American journalist said, as a member of the British royal family, he's a figurehead of colonialism and has no record of commitment to the kind of ideas that Mandela stood for. Harry talks about climate change, telling us about the danger of it. Yet there is no doubt in my mind that he would have flown there by private jet, possibly the same one he jetted at breakneck speed back in during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, to a weird little place called Montecito. Let's be honest here. If you compare his carbon footprint to any one of us, his is a crater. He's making a fortune out of this. It's nothing short of professional whinging. He's got a book coming out, another whinge fest. I mean, what has he honestly got to complain about? And now he's won his bid to bring part of his High Court claim against the Home Office over his security arrangements whilst in the UK, a place where he doesn't appear to really want to visit. He is bringing legal action over a decision not to allow him to pay for police protection for himself and his family when they're here. He's challenging the decision made in February 2020 by the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, which is otherwise known as RAVEC, after being told that he would no longer be given the same degree of personal protection. Well, he's not a working royal. It's a choice that he made. You can't have your cake and eat it, Harry. And if Tom Bower's new book is to be believed, the alleged racist comment exposed in dramatic style on Oprah could have been a comment made by Camilla, where she apparently told her stepson it would be funny if his kids had a ginger afro. Well, in my view, that's not racist at all. It would be funny. Palace insiders are believed to have blasted the claim as nonsense. But still, Harry looks miserable of late, expecting to evoke sympathy from those who care to buy into it. And the irony is, they'll probably be living in poverty and they'll actually be supporting him. He's making a fortune out of his own self-imposed misery. He's a professional victim. Great work if you can get it. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For my difficult conversation this afternoon, I'll be looking at plastic and talking about the trouble that it causes. We're looking at why millions of people around the world are going plastic-free this month. The campaign's officer at the Marine Conservation Society will join me in the studio to talk about the impact plastic is having on society and the environment across the world. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you regret Brexit? Bosses at Dover have blamed Brexit for delays of up to 30 hours faced by families trying to get to Europe from the port of Dover. A major incident has been declared as passengers wait for hours to get through French passport control before boarding. So I'm asking, do you regret Brexit? Do you think it's got anything at all to do with Brexit? And I'll be joined by royal biographer Angela Levin for this week's Royal Roundup. On the agenda today, Prince Harry, he's won his bid, as we mentioned earlier, to bring a part of his High Court action claim against the Home Office over the security arrangements whilst he's in the UK. Now, that is on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome to my panel Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson and broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Right, so welcome both of you. Lizzie looking very summery. Nice to see you, Calvin.
Thank you. I'm excited to get to work with Lizzie today.
I'm so excited. I'm with Calvin, my fave.
Sorry, what about me?
And you, of course.
I mean, sorry, I'm sounding like Prince Harry. What about me?
Don't start moaning and whinging.
And what do you make of this? Look, he's doing this talk at the UN, this sort of conference on Nelson Mandela Day, which I don't know why they've invited him. But Calvin, I'm going to start with you. What was your take on it? Because it felt to me like he was kind of bringing in things that have affected him, but trying to correlate it to that and, you know, disguising his own misery.
It was bizarre because Nelson Mandela made a genuine impact. Some people will see it as good, some people will see it as bad, but he made a difference in the world. I'm not quite sure what Harry's done yet, other than talk about himself and his wife. What difference has he made to anyone's lives? I don't get it. I think he's trying to paint himself as a hero, say, you know, my life has been tough too, I'm trying to fight the good fight, climate change is serious, I'm trying to make a difference, but how? First of all, prove that climate change is man-made. Secondly, stop lecturing to people while you're making a bigger carbon footprint than everyone else. And then thirdly, just get on with your own life if you want a private life.
But the gall of it for him to think that he could be talking about climate change, poverty, freedom of speech, it's like all of these things, none of which will affect him. Climate change, well, you've seen the private jet that he had when he flew back from the Jubilee.
Exactly.
I mean, how dare he even open his mouth? I just find it astounding.
What's given him... Who's told him he's the doctor of all this? Where has he got all this knowledge from? I'm sorry, to me, you're Prince Dumbo, and you're a non-working royal. You're not entitled to a slice of the purse of anyone, I'm telling you. And he should do what the other prince did, but he sung on Purple Rain. Do your own security, pay for it yourself. I'm really sorry.
Well, he was offering to pay for it himself, but I think it was that he wanted the royal protection that he would have had. But they're saying, well, you're not really a working royal, as it were, so that's why you're not getting it. But he's offering to pay for it, but they're saying, no, well, but you're not a working royal.
It's not a working royal, and I think the best thing they can do is do yoga on the beach, eat avocados and stay away. If you're that worried about security, then don't come. And I'm sorry, the security won't stop the booze. And people have, frankly, had enough of them.
No, but the police aren't a private security force, are they? If he wants security, he can pay for private security like everybody else who's a person of influence. I don't understand why he wants our police, our taxpayer-funded police force.
It's not rent-a-cop, is it?
Well, because he's probably used to this sort of level of protection, and he doesn't get it that because he's decided he doesn't want to be part of it, and actually I don't think he should be, and even if he hadn't done it, I think they would have decided that he would be sidelined anyway. But because of that, there are certain things that they're going to have to cut back and change. And he's not ready for that. He thought that he could say, I'm going to walk away from this, I don't want to do any of it, but I'll have the exact same thing. And he's just not handling it. And I find it sort of slightly insulting that he should be then taking it to the High Court and wasting... I mean, isn't it taxpayers' money that we spent to try and sort of defend or try and defend this position? I don't understand why we should even be going there. It's not so.
I just find it so insulting when they're both making money on the royal family. They're doing Netflix, or should I say Notflix, and maybe that's why he wants the police escorts, because it's going to look great, you know, in all the footage. But they're not to be trusted, and that's why, you know, and if they're that worried about Jubilee, did you not see her with her window down to get the camera opportunity, Meghan? So if you're that worried about it, you should be not doing that, Meghan. And I've really had enough of these two, moaning, whinging and suing, you know, not just the press, now the government, anyone. It's like they're obsessed with anyone that doesn't agree with them, they'll sue.
Yeah, and the irony is they're talking about freedom of speech. It's like, well, you're suing anybody who ever says anything or has an opinion or or is doing things that you're not really happy with. I mean, freedom of speech should allow people to make comments. I agree if someone said something that's totally out of order. But I just find this is just going back and forth. Why are you doing this bit? Because you want to show that it's not right that you shouldn't be allowed to pay for this security thing. Pay for your own private security and you don't have to use this RAVIC protection, royal protection. You're not royal anymore. Well, you are a member of the royal family, but you're not a working royal.
Well, that was their decision, though. Don't forget, they were the ones that said they want privacy, yet they're the ones doing the interviews, doing the Oprahs. Apparently another one's coming up, so they'll have loads of money. They can use that.
It seems like they want the prestige and they want the fame, but they don't want to do the hard work that working royals have to do.
Exactly, and it's very different from being a royal than, you know, like a Hollywood celebrity royal, which I think she was, and it's very different. It's hard work being a royal.
I think they're on a slippery, slidey slope. I don't think this is looking good for them. The Americans are not buying into it anymore, and even those that really supported them at the start are beginning to go, hang on a minute, that was exactly their effect here. Me, I cottoned on pretty fast, and I cottoned on only when they started doing the climate change thing. I knew they'd taken, 11 private jets. They then went on to talk about how they're going to offset their carbon and blah, 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 and I just thought, hang on a minute. You lecturing us about... Think of their carbon footprint now. Think of Harry's carbon footprint just to do this one thing.
But it's so hypocritical. That's what makes me so angry. You know, when they're taking jets, and who are they to lecture us? Who asked him? And where did he get his knowledge from? I mean, who is he to say all this? It really angers me.
I'm quite worried about him, His Royal Highness, because I don't know if you saw the clip that came over while Nana was giving her monologue, the footage of those two recently. It looks like he's being manipulated. He's trying to move his arm away, and she's grabbing it and saying, no, put your arm here. It looks very forceful. Something's going on there. He doesn't look happy.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Kelvin. And I have to say, it makes me think of his great uncle, wasn't it, Edward, who also got seduced by an American divorcee, who also became a bit of a waster, and always felt he was hard done by.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because he has such privilege. He has such opportunity to make something with his privilege. But I think if it had been in a different scenario, so say he hadn't decided, I don't want to be royal and all this thing, if it had been in another scenario and he was representing the royal family, we would all have a bit more respect. But there was that other aspect that the American sort of journalists said that really they were almost an emblem of colonialism. So they were really the wrong, if anything, this was the wrong person to be giving that sort of lecture.
I'm not buying into that nonsense. I can't play them at their own game. There's nothing wrong with the British Empire's history. We did as much good for the world as bad for the world, and we have to look at it in a balanced approach. And these people that say, no, they can't speak because they're colonialists, that's not the reason they can't speak. They can't speak because of the reasons Lizzie said. They're not experts in this matter.
And I just think it's so sad because he was our most favourite royal. And when they first came on the scene, they had more good press written about than ever Kate and William. They really were loved and welcomed.
To be honest, I was slightly put off with him when he decided to attend a party dressed as a Nazi. I mean, that did put me off a little.
Well, yes.
I just don't think that there's any level of humour that I could find in that. Unfortunately,
Very
don't
true.
find that funny in any way, shape or form. Well, if you just joined me, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We are live. Don't forget, you can download the GB News app to catch up with everything on the channel. After the break, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, do you regret Brexit? Bosses at Dover have blamed Brexit for delays of up to 30 hours faced by families trying to get to Europe from the port of Dover. Now, it's not the first time Brexit has been blamed for a crisis, whether it's the lack of HGV drivers, the non-existent fuel shortages or hikes in energy prices. Nothing seems immune from blame Brexit. So I'm asking, do you regret Brexit? Send me your thoughts, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet at GBNews. And I've got a poll up right now. I'm asking you that question. What do you think? Do you regret Brexit? Cast your vote. But first, let's get some weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet across the north and west, but drier in the south and east. Let's take a look at the details. Scattered showers, which could be heavy at times, will move slowly eastwards across southwest England as we head through the evening. Breezy with temperatures around 18 or 19 Celsius. A fine evening to come across southeast England with plenty of sunny spells. Feeling warm and humid with temperatures up in the low to mid-20s. Often cloudy across southern Wales with outbreaks of rain moving through. The rain could be heavy at times too. Breezy with temperatures around 19 Celsius. Increasing amounts of cloud across the Midlands this evening. It should remain mostly dry, but a few showers may move in across the west later. Temperatures hovering around 21 Celsius with light winds. Rather cloudy this evening across northeast England with just the odd spot of light rain possible. This mainly falling over the higher ground. Rather humid with temperatures sat in the low 20s of Celsius. A mostly cloudy evening to come across much of southern Scotland. Outbreaks of rain will move through on a brisky southerly breeze with temperatures at 18 or 19 degrees Celsius. A cloudy evening for Northern Ireland with some heavy rain moving across the country. Rather breezy too along eastern coast. Temperatures will range from 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. Outbreaks of rain will continue to move across the country as we head overnight, staying windy for western areas in particular. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Join us every Sunday at 10 a.m. for The Political Correction.
We're here to put you, the people, back in charge. Our debate is about all areas of the United Kingdom.
It's about what's really going on in our country.
It's about you. So please get in touch and tell us what you think.
Don't miss it. It's The Political Correction every Sunday at 10 a.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. Welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before the break, I was discussing the Duke of Sussex. He's won his bid to bring part of his High Court claim against the Home Office over his security arrangements whilst he's in this country. Prince Harry is bringing legal action over a decision not to allow him to pay for police protection for himself and his family when they're here. Let's take a look at what you've been saying. Matt says, Harry talks nonsense. Whatever his wife tells him to care about, that's what he does, completely under the thumb. Margaret says, well, I mean, every good man should be slightly under the thumb. Why does Harry moan and whinge about the woes of the world but makes no insight on how to solve them? Cynthia says, let's face it, Harry should be renamed Harry Markle. It seems to me like she's the one pulling the strings. And then John says Harry should pay for police protection when he comes over to the UK. Well, listen, John, he's not saying he doesn't want to pay for it. He's saying he will pay for it, but he wants to use this Ravek thing. He wants the royal protection and the same protection that he normally gets. And they're saying, no, you can have protection, but, you know, pay for your own private stuff. And Jill says, why are we even talking about Harry? He's a nothing but trouble. He's nothing but trouble to the UK. I know, but it's so entertaining, isn't it, really? Right, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. Keep your thoughts coming. I'm asking, do you regret Brexit? Now, families looking to get to France from the port of Dover are continuing to face huge delays as travellers wait long hours in queues trying to get through French passport control before boarding their ferry. Now, yesterday it was declared as a major incident. Some drivers waited up to 30 hours to get through the backlog. And today, around about 10,000 cars are expected to be processed through the port. Dover is blaming Brexit for the chaos, and the Foreign Secretary and Tory leadership, contender Liz Truss, has demanded action from French authorities. And, of course, it isn't the first time Brexit has been blamed for things. It's being blamed for everything, basically. Whether it's the lack of HGV drivers, Brexit, the non-existent fuel shortages or hikes in energy, Brexit. Nothing seems immune from Brexit blame. So I'm asking, with all that blame, do you regret Brexit? First of all, I'm joined by political commentator Benedict Spence. Benedict, thank you for joining me. So do you agree with the Port of Dover blaming Friday's delays on a lack of French border force officials, or is France punishing us for Brexit, or are they one or two of the same things?
I think it's a myriad of issues. I mean, certainly Brexit and the added bureaucracy plays a part, but you can't get away from the fact that if the French authorities don't have the requisite number of staff, then that also obviously plays a part. Dover, by its very nature, is also a bottleneck. And actually, long before Brexit and long before the travel issues that we've been having as a result of the pandemic, very frequently you'd have quite large delays there. So, you know, this is, I mean, delays of this scale aren't perhaps standard, but delays in general there aren't new. I think that this is just, I have to say, it's one of those very sort of tawdry issues. It's a very small issue when you look at it for what it actually is compared to the broader situation across the rest of the country when you look at it through the prism of Brexit. And I think it betrays a rather negative attitude, which is that the response is never, let's look at the issues surrounding, say, travel at Dover and look at ways of upscaling, increasing capacity, finding practical solutions to this. The response is to just go, well, it's this is fault. And if we just go backwards in time to a previous scenario, everything would be fine.
Because if you did go backwards in time, you'd have found that there were actually queues. We did have problems with this sort of thing, and we've had problems with this sort of thing anyway. Now, the Immigration Services Union General Secretary says that this disruption was to be expected post-Brexit, and it's not France blaming us. They do these checks on all non-EU passengers. Is that true?
I mean, absolutely, there's an element of that is true. But again, that's why I'm sort of sat here going, OK, well, where's the ambition? Where's the idea of saying, well, we can overcome this by increasing capacity, be it on our side or in France? Obviously, if it's in France, then that's an issue for the French authorities, and their own lack of ambition is their own issue. But in this country, I'm sort of thinking, we look at Dover in particular, it's one outlet, but there are other ways of getting to the continent. You don't have to go via France. You can also go via Belgium or Holland. And again, for me, the whole thing about Brexit was it was an opportunity. I know that it was very unpopular amongst a lot of people, but it provided opportunities to reset things that were stagnating. And this is one example of an area where, as you just pointed out, there were plenty of backlogs in the past because it is a natural, funnel. So you're always going to get issues if too many people try to use it at once. This was an opportunity to potentially branch out, look at other systems that would be very expensive to perhaps open up new ferry lines that go to different ports. But ultimately, that is how you overcome these things. You look for solutions, you look for other ways of dealing with it. You don't sit there and you go, well, isn't everything terrible and it's all this thing's fault and there's nothing we can do about it unless I just sit here and sulk until I get my own way.
Well, that's true right there. So in one word, do you regret Brexit?
Not yet. That's 2 words.
That's 2 words. Benedict, thank you so much. That's Benedict Spence. He's a political commentator. Right, I'm also joined in the studio by former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Now, Stephen, thank you for joining me. Brexit gets blamed for everything, pretty much.
Except the weather.
Well, they'll try. They'll try. It'll be something to do with global warming. That's caused by a lot of backlog of traffic and some CO2.
God, you're hardcore, aren't
They'll
you?
find a way. Stephen, what do you think, then? Is this, in your view, because of Brexit?
No, look, let's go back to first principles. Brexit is here. I voted against it, but I've got to live with it. We've got to live with the rest of Europe. If you listen to French radio, I was listening to France Inter this morning, and they were saying, when they said, well, why aren't there more people staffing the bus? They said, why the hell should we? You smashed our window. They said, why should we pay to reglaze it? You've decided to leave, we, the Brits, have decided to leave the European Union. Why should they pay to train, staff and finance extra staff there? And if you go to Heathrow Airport now, how many of the entry points there do you see that are staffed? I see normally about 6 out of 20. So, look, obviously, Brexit's made it worse, but this is as nothing compared to what's going to be happening on the island of Ireland. That is really when the chickens are going to come home to roost.
Well, look, you've got 12 booths. It's like when you go to a bank, you see, they're the only ones that don't seem to be able to do their sums. you've got like 10 booths.
That's harsh.
Well, it does seem to be. They've got 10 booths and 2 people at them. You've got 12 booths. You know it's going to be one of the busiest days of the year, or, so far, and you only put half the staff there. And we have given the French a lot of money in terms of policing borders and looking after this sort of thing. So they have budget from the UK to ensure this is done properly.
We have specifically given them some ring-fence money.
Right.
So, that's mostly to do with coastal security. But don't forget, there's 10,000 vehicle movements today. It's a fantastic number moving through Dover. And, there are alternative ways of crossing. So I think to blame the French, to come up with this...
Why is it not their fault? Look, you've got 12... Look,
it's not their fault, because before June 2016, they could just wave us through. We just had to show our passports. After the horrors of June 2016, which I regret every minute of every day...
Ramona.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but a democratic Ramona. Look, and I tell you what makes it...
You say that. There's a lot of democratic Ramonas who will put blocks in the way. So what we've got here is people who want to go back into the EU, and also the EU themselves who aren't happy with the fact that we've left. And that pressure is actually, I believe, what the hindrance is. It's not actually because of Brexit. It's because people won't allow Brexit to be executed effectively. And this giving only 6 members of staff when you've got 12, and as you said, 10,000 vehicles coming through, they know it's going to be busy, I think is another...
I'm not one of these people who believes in a sort of complete fantasy, like Liz Truss economics. I don't believe in a sort of fantasy worlds. We're not going to rejoin the European Union. The European Union, as it existed before 2016, has changed. It is changing all the time. It's a totally different one. But what I do believe is a constructive dialogue. And when you have one of the candidates for the leadership of the Conservative Party and the Prime Minister channeling Margaret Thatcher with pussy bows and posing on tanks and saying she's going to get tough with the French...
I'm going to stop. I'm not going to allow you to get away with that, because I think that's slightly sexist, channeling Margaret Thatcher. I don't think they're pussy bows and stuff like that. Look, she's wearing what she wears.
Pussy bows?
Yeah, it is a bit, isn't it? Look...
Thank you, at least we're posing on a tank?
Look, Rishi Sunak and his suntan...
I've never seen him in a pussy bow.
Have you seen his suntan cream and the sunscreen? And yes, he's got some sunscreen that he gave out to the press, and it says that this will stop Labour or whatever. It'll stop you from getting red or whatever. Yeah, so, they're both...
Well, I haven't even started on him yet.
Well, yeah, but I don't think that she's doing fantasy economics, first of all. I think that taxing people to the hilt and then expecting an economy to grow is actually the fantasy in reality.
Sadly, it's Patrick Minford who's talking, not her.
Yeah. Well, no, she is talking, and she...
No, but she changes her position every couple of weeks. Who knows? Next week, she's going to be a Reaganite.
Who, Liz Truss?
Liz Truss, oh, for heaven's sake.
She doesn't change her position every few weeks.
What?
It's a political journey. You can go on a journey.
It's a hell of a journey.
Listen, the worst thing you can do is be somebody who's rigid on your point of view, like Rishi Sunak, when you can see that the things are wrong and carrying on in the wrong direction.
Maynard Keynes said, when the facts change, I change my mind.
Well, that's
what
a
else
good
should
thing.
I do? I entirely agree with that. But when you go from end the royal family Liberal Democrat to abolishing money to somehow changing all that from being a passionate Remainer to a passionate Brexiteer. I'm sorry, that is fundamental. That is not just a shift of nuance.
No, that
is a fundamental difference.
No, that's how you think, because you're rigid in your place as a Ramona, and you can't even see...
I'm a Democrat.
Yeah, you're not really. I think that's what people say. They claim they're the Democratic, but then they put things in, obstacles in the way to make sure that the Democratic mandate...
I'm not a complete mug. There's no way that we can make such a nuisance of ourselves that the rest of Europe is going to say, kill her, let us return to this, let us invite the roast beef back again. That ain't going to happen.
Well, it's not
let's
gonna
be
happen because
grown
they
up
want to
and
make
let's have a proper conversation.
Well, that's what we've been trying to do
Yeah.
with the French for a long time, especially, I mean, as you mentioned the Northern Ireland Protocol. And I mean, to be honest, they could create a free trade zone, as they have done with Canada. They have done it with other countries who are not within the EU, but they won't do it. And you know why? It's because they don't want it to make it look easy and that you get the same benefits if you leave, when ultimately that would actually be a solution, wouldn't it?
The reason why they can't do it is
Well, they won't do it, so they can't do
I'm sorry, there's a 302-mile border from
Yes.
Donegal to Dundalk. There's no way on God's green earth you could police that border. Nobody even knows where the flipping border is.
They don't need to.
Of course they do. The minute you have border patrols there and you have guard posts, uniformed guard, you're back to Good Friday agreement.
They don't need to. They could create the free trade zone. They could.
But they've tried that in Sweden and Norway. Have you been there? It's a
I have.
joke.
Norway is the most
if you look at
expensive
their
country I've ever been to.
Yeah.
A pint of beer, 15.
Can we agree on that?
Let's agree with that.
Let's agree on that.
No, I don't ever touch it. There's COVID and monkeypox. Crikey, I'm not touching any.
You accusing me of...
I don't know, do I? Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
That is, of course, Stephen Pound. He's a former Labour MP. Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we will continue with the Great British Debate as the huge queues in Dover continue to cause delays for travellers trying to get to France. Border officials are blaming Brexit for the backlog. It's not the first time, of course, the UK, the Brexit's been blamed. There's been loads of things. So I'm asking, do you regret Brexit? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson, and also broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
"4:34, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Well, as we've just heard, drivers hoping to travel through the port of Dover are facing a second day of severe delays. Although the number of French border staff has been increased, authorities say there's still some way to go to clear the backlog. One French politician claims the delays are a result of Brexit, as more checks need to be carried out than before. The World Health Organization has now declared that monkeypox is a global health emergency. The organisation's Director General warns the global risk to people is moderate. However, in Europe, it's high. Today's announcement means the WHO believes a coordinated international response is needed. Rishi Sunak says he'll put the UK on a crisis footing to tackle issues, including inflation, if he becomes Prime Minister. Speaking in Grantham earlier, the former Chancellor hit back at tax cuts planned by his rival, Liz Truss, warning they could lead to further inflation. He also promised to tackle the NHS backlog, pledging to eliminate one-year waiting lists by September 2024. Meanwhile, Liz Truss is promising a red tape bonfire of all EU laws retained after Brexit if she becomes Prime Minister. The Foreign Secretary says she'll implement a review by the end of next year and scrap rules which hinder UK growth. She argues the measures would encourage business investment, but critics warn it may weaken workers' rights. And President Zelensky says Russia's missile strikes on the port of Odessa show it will find ways to renege on yesterday's grain deal. The agreement is supposed to allow the export of grain from Ukraine, easing global food shortages. The country currently has around 20 million tonnes in silos. It follows months of Russian blockades in the Black Sea. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back to Nana Akua in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome on board GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 39 minutes after 4 o'clock. And we return to our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you regret Brexit? The Foreign Secretary and Tory leadership hopeful Liz Truss has called the long queues at the port of Dover unacceptable and unavoidable as she demands action from French authorities to smooth the process of crossing between the two countries. Now, yesterday, a major incident was declared with some drivers waiting up to 30 hours to get through French passport control before boarding the ferry. And today, there's about 10,000 cars which are expected to be processed through the port. French officials are blaming Brexit for the chaos, as they say it's led to increased checks at the border. It's not the first time, of course, Brexit has been blamed for a crisis, whether it's the lack of HGV drivers, the non-existent fuel shortages or hikes in energy prices. Nothing seems immune from Brexit blame. So I'm asking, do you regret Brexit? So let's see what you're being saying. Mark says, I don't regret Brexit one bit. I regret that Brexit is at this point not complete. I like that at least Liz Truss is talking about a bonfire of EU regulations. We need to be free to make our own path. Yes, we would still be good for Europe. Alison says, absolutely not. I'd vote leave again and again and again. It's about time people got over the fact that we've left. Let's just get on with it and make the best of Brexit. We've been let down by Boris, but I'm sure Liz will finish the job. And Paul says, I'm even more pro-Brexit now in view of how the French are, in my opinion, deliberately causing trouble on the border. We should have done it years ago. We'll keep your thoughts coming. I'm sure there's somebody out there that thinks that Brexit was a bad idea. I mean, they'll be moaning at the screen now. But let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robertson, also broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, I'm going to start with you. Brexit. They're blaming Brexit for this latest one. Do you blame Brexit?
Oh, it's always Brexit fault. Even if Chelsea lose, it's Brexit fault. For goodness sake, stop blaming Brexit. No, it isn't. This is the French border controls that aren't doing what they should be doing. Do you know what? On the way in, I called a friend who I knew was in that queue. She's been there 7 hours in the heat. She's saying there's no help. They're all worried about the, petrol prices. They've all been sitting there for hours and hours.
Well, she's not driving an electric car, is she?
Yeah. Well, look, I just get annoyed to keep using this term Brexit with the horrible undertones. Brexit was the process. Brexit now is exit. We've done it, and people, we've just got to get on with it. And it's really annoying me. This is the French fault. I'm sorry, this chaos is their fault.
It seems that some people say that they're punishing us because we left, and also the same with the Channel crossings as well, that they're enabling it because, well, what do they care? Once they get to the UK, we're going to have a job getting them back. And also we left and they're still in it. Calvin?
Yeah, absolutely. Brexit, to me, was about our sovereignty. We got back control of our laws, our borders, and the ability to vote or elect the people that make our laws. So if we don't like them, we can get rid of them. We couldn't do that before. It's quite simple. They're making it more complicated than it has to be, and blaming things like this on Brexit is disingenuous. What we have here is the French not turning up for work. They're notorious for it, Quite often they have strikes in France. However, now it's affecting us on our borders. You rightly said in your little tit for tat with Stephen Pound, which was very entertaining. Was it? You rightly said that we send a lot of money to France, not necessarily for the passport control, but to control the border in general. Yeah. And they're not doing the job. I think we should be controlling our own borders with our gunships in our sea, turning ships away, turning boats away, as they do in Australia. I also found it interesting when Mr. Pound said they're asking the question, why should we, as in patrol the border and check passports?
It's a job.
That is their
It's their
job.
job.
That's what
It's
they're
a job. I mean,
exactly. So when we were in the European Union, they could just wave people through, just see our passport, wave them through. Long before we were in the European Union, they were checking passports. It's what a passport officer is supposed to do.
Exactly. And why is it that you've got 12 booths there and only half of them, are, 5 have shown up? It's not on. It really isn't. And the reason, this government now can move more quickly, if we don't like a policy, we don't have to go through 27 other countries in the EU, right? So it's a good thing.
Well, they're
let's just
stuck
get
in
on
there,
with
then.
it. And
But they're stuck in there, even though if polls are to be believed, the majority of people in France would actually like to be out of it, it would seem. I mean, so they're still in it, though, aren't they? So why they're being so obstructive and making this difficult? In particular, there's other things. So, OK, so we've got this particular situation, but then, of course, we've got the boats coming across. And I think, and I was talking to Neil Oliver earlier, and he was saying that they could stop the boats in a heartbeat. Yeah. We could stop them in a heartbeat, but we're not. And there's got to be some other thing going on there. Well, why are we not?
It's a bit cowardly. We don't have any politicians strong enough to say, we are going to stop this right here, right now. It's wrong, it's damaging people's lives, it's supporting gang culture, we need to cut it. But we don't have anyone willing to do that. And the civil service have been stronger than the politicians up to date.
Well, stronger in obstructing anything, haven't
absolutely.
they?
But, as Steve was saying, he gave Liz Truss a lot of stick. And I thought, well, that was a bit rich. I mean, there was Rishi in his Prada shoes. We're talking about outfits on the building sites, whatever, pointing at everyone. But just say, Liz Truss was good in what she said. And we've got to be strong against the French. People saying, oh, no, this is going to wreck relations. We need to be strong and tough. That's what we need, like Margaret Thatcher.
And it is about painting a bad picture around Brexit, because French people want to leave the European Union. Italian people want to leave the European Union. Lots of people around Europe want to leave the European Union, and they have to make it look difficult and bad and harmful to leave. Otherwise, people will be leaving in their droves.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not buying because of Brexit. I think that a lot of the people who've been very obstructive with this then try and go, it's Brexit's fault, but they don't want to do it, or they don't want to succeed, so they put the energy against it, like even our own border force, like our own civil servants who would have, many of them voted to remain. So they go, it's not working, when nobody's really put any real effort in. It's sort of like a Theresa May example.
We need to now make it work. I mean, that's one thing Boris did do, is get Brexit done. We need to make it work.
He just got on with it. He got on with it, and that's what we need to do. Well, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice. This is your opportunity to tell us what you think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go? Should we go to that boring place, Hull?
They have a good bridge, though.
Well, Simon's there. No, I'm teasing you, Simon. Simon Kelsey, you know I'm teasing you. Although one time it was voted the most boring place in the UK. But things have changed in Hull, I know that. Simon, so what do you think?
Nobody that ever went to Hull voted it the most boring place.
No, well, that was in a book that I read.
In Hull.
But I'd love to go to it.
Yeah,
well, it sounds great, but it does rhyme with dull. Simon, I'm joking. I'm teasing you now. Simon, what do you think then? Do you regret Brexit?
Do I regret? I voted to remain, so I do regret it. I mean, the French, they're now part of the European Union, and we are a small competitor. Of course, they're dragging their feet. Who wouldn't? They're sulking, but they're the more powerful ones. We're the ones that want to leave. All those people in the queues for 10 hours, I'm guessing most of those voted to remain and would like to be waved through passport control. So they've all got to show their passports. The French will drag their feet because they can, and we're stuck there. I mean, it's not like you could fly out of Heathrow anymore, is it? Because all the foreign baggage handlers have been sent home.
Yeah,
so we're kind of stuck. We've chosen to leave. And that's where we are, and it'll get worse, and it'll carry on.
But Simon, you know that those foreign baggage handlers were probably paid a very small fee because they could be paid that, because bigger business was enabling that. And now the reason why there probably aren't so many baggage handlers is because those companies will be forced to pay a good wage, a proper wage to people working there. That's not a bad thing. And also, you sound like that you're sympathising with the French, saying that of course they would. Why would they bother because of Brexit?
Now they've all gone home.
Listen, if it's your job,
people are not queuing up to take those jobs, are they? So we're just stuck without them, and now we're relying on the French passport control to check our passports. They're dragging their feet. I mean, we have voted for it, and that's what we're stuck with. So it's not a question of do we blame the French or not. The fact is, this is something we will have to deal with. And if people want to get to France, they'll have to queue up in the car park overnight. and that is what we voted for. That is what we're going to have to.
No, we didn't vote for that. And you would have thought that, Simon, you would have thought people would behave in good faith, though. You know, it's your job, that's your job. You don't think, well, I'm not happy with the decision that's made, so I would drag my heels and make it difficult. I think we didn't anticipate that would be the behaviour.
You never worked in the public service. I mean, that's not just France, England, anywhere. If people don't want to do a job, if people are politically opposed to something, they'll drag their feet.
Well, they should just leave and get another job.
Life. And so it's all right saying, yeah, we blame the French. And to some extent, I'm sure those people are right. But that is what they're going to do. And that's what they'll do forever, because
listen,
they're
if
never
I
happy
employed...
we've left.
Well, Simon,
and you're probably
listen,
right, Nana, that actually they're annoyed with us and they're taking it out on us.
Exactly.
But that is the situation, and we will stay in that situation. So we'll just have to get used to the long queues. We'll have to get used to no baggage handlers.
I don't think so.
Reality.
No, Simon, I thank you very much for your views. It's always good to hear your thoughts. I love that. Don't you love a little bit of a ding, Simon? I don't usually argue with the great British voice, but on Brexit, I feel strongly. Simon, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's Simon
Come to Hull
Kelsey.
one day.
Yeah, come to Hull one day. No, I don't think so, Simon. No, I might be.
That's because you said Hull was dull. That's
Well,
right.
it rhymes with dull. It rhymes with dull. I don't know whether it is dull. Right, let's see what you've been saying then. Today I've been asking, do you regret Brexit? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. Joe says, no, I don't. I do regret the EU's continued vindictiveness over us leaving their club. The EU seems to be dead set on conflict rather than cooperating. See, that's what I was saying to Simon, that actually, when something like this happens, you actually expect people to comply and go along with things, don't you? So I'm surprised. I was expecting a less childish approach. But
it's democracy, isn't it? You have to accept that you might lose the debate or lose the argument.
Exactly.
Well, I was campaigning for vote leave quite strongly, but all along the way I thought we'd lose it. I'd never thought in a million years we'd win. And I thought if we lose, we'll resign our opinion and we'd get along with the group, with the majority group. But that didn't happen in the opposite.
See, we didn't expect that. We didn't expect that childish behaviour. Mary says, I voted Remain and I do regret Brexit. The problems just keep stacking up. Well, they would do, because, and I agree with the first message, the vindictiveness is what we're getting here. Annie says, Annie, tomorrow, the Brexit debate is over. We're out for good. The only link to the delays at Dover is the French. They do not like that we have left the EU because they've lost their cash cow. And Mark says it's simple. Don't let the French blame Brexit. Don't book a holiday to France or the EU for a couple of years and hit them in the pocket. I'm sure they'll behave a bit better than that. Well, I agree with that as well, because a lot of people who voted to Remain were whinging, saying, I can't go to France now, you're going to have to use a visa now to get... And I'm like, let that be the least of your worries.
Gosh. But the thing is that the public voted, we have left.
We've left.
And we're not going back to the EU.
Well, let's see. I want to see the poll. Let's have a look at it. There's a poll throughout the show. Let's see what everyone's saying. Whether they regret Brexit. Currently, 87% of you say no. Only 13% say yes. Well, we'll be back very shortly. This is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, I'll be joined by royal biographer Angela Levin for this week's Royal Roundup. And on the agenda, of course, Prince Harry. He's won a bid to bring part of his High Court claim against the Home Office over his security arrangements whilst his family in the UK. Stay tuned, that's on the way next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. Welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's coming up to 6 minutes to 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Now, there's always something going on in the royal household. There's always a royal revelation. And this week has been no different because every Saturday I like to give you that rundown. So on the agenda, the Duke of Sussex, he's won the bid to bring part of his High Court claim against the Home Office over the security arrangements whilst he's in this country. Bombshell claims over comments made by the Duchess of Cornwall over Harry and Meghan's son Archie, and Prince George turns 9. So I'm joined in the studio by royal biographer Angela Levin. Angela, oh, it's so good to see you. Looking good and looking rich in red. Angela, so I want to start with Prince Harry. Now, this case against the Home Office is one part of the bid for the case to be heard. So tell us a bit more about it.
Yes. Well, originally, he felt the country wasn't safe enough for him. So he wanted to be guaranteed that he would have protection officers 24 hours a day for all of them, his wife and his children. But now he's not a working member of the royal family. He can't have that. But he can have it if he goes somewhere where there is royals. But that's not good enough for him. So he offered to pay, but they won't take the money because they don't look after individuals. They make sure the country's all right. It's not a case of buying. And if he bought, because he's now no longer a working member of the royal family, anyone who had the money could do that. So we would have no ability to be careful about our secrets or to watch anything, because you'd have people from all over the world with their own protection officers investigating what our people and security officers know about what's going on and terrorism and all that sort of thing. So that's where it's come from. And so he tried to, when he was refused this, he tried to take the thing to court, and he didn't realise that they discussed it with working members of the royal family, and that made him absolutely incandescent with rage. So that's what he's trying to get now. And the judge said that he couldn't know who it was. He can take it to an investigation, but he's not going to be told who the Home Office spoke to, which is quite right. It's not his business, really. And the fact he also said was that he was 6th in line to the throne, so he had the right to be treated as if he was a royal family. Well, I mean, he's just left the royal family, he hates the royal family. You can't have it both, Harry, you know?
That's an evil laugh from me. I shouldn't laugh. Because it sounds like he didn't really understand the implications of saying that he's no longer a working royal. This isn't a rule that's just come in specifically for him.
No, no, no.
This is a rule that's existed, that if he had read up about what he would lose if he were no longer a working royal, which he was, which he chose not to do, then he would have realised that this is one of the things that he would not be part of.
Well, I think he would have known, because he would know who knows the secrets and who doesn't. And it's very unlikely that anybody who you're slightly doubtful about will know the actual secrets of terrorism or potential things that might happen. And so he wanted to feel that he had the right to know this. Well, he doesn't anymore.
Wow.
He can't live in another country. He can't bring people from America because they can't be told those sorts of details. Quite right, too. We have to protect the country.
So we don't know what will be the outcome. Obviously, that's still going on. Now, what about the claim now that Camilla asked if Harry's son would have a ginger afro, or made a reference to ginger afro, which I don't think that's a racist comment. But what's the deal? What's happening?
Well, what's very interesting is that this happened in 2016. Now, 2016, Meghan was a new girlfriend. They didn't get engaged until November 2017 or married until the spring 2018. Now, what sane person would say to someone who brought a girlfriend to their country to talk about a potential baby. It just wouldn't happen. It's a nonsense. Camilla is very careful. She doesn't let slip anything. She's got children of her own. She would know that you don't ask somebody about a potential baby when they've just started going out with a girlfriend. So I think it's an absolute nonsense comment. And also, she's very cautious. She's always been cautious what she says to both William and Harry, because she understands their situation, that she's now taking the place, not as an individual, but as a potential queen, instead of their mother.
So, of course, this is allegations that the palace has said that this is all nonsense.
Well, I'm quite sure it's nonsense.
So
That's
this
what
was
any sort of sense. It's also not about skin.
No, it's about...
I mean, Meghan complained that they're saying, how dark was the skin?
So are they saying that this comment potentially, is it Tom Bowles' book, is saying that potentially this is the comment that Meghan was referring to when they talked about...
He doesn't quite say that. He often dodges those things.
Yes, that's what I thought. So is that sort of where it's heading in a way?
Yes.
I see. So this is... And obviously they've not been specific.
But hair is not skin. And in any case, even if you ask about skin, it can be done in a nice way. But you wouldn't ask 2 years before they were married, would you? I mean, it's nonsense.
No, so that's why they can't...
Wipe it out.
Wipe it out, rub it out. And finally, new photos released of Prince George's 9th birthday.
It's absolutely the most charming picture. And you can see that he's now a bit older now. He's no longer a little boy. He's actually edible, but he's actually a huge smile, very happy, less shy. And his mother takes these pictures so well, and that avoids the paparazzi coming or photographers coming, so they've got more privacy. But he now looks a very happy, contented boy. And I think it's because they've taken him out to shake hands with people and to go... they went to Wales, part of the Jubilee, and I think he's getting more relaxed and confident, which is really nice to see, because he was very, very shy, but now looks like his father, and he's charming, and it's a lovely picture.
It is
absolutely
a cutie.
Lovely.
Angela, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to talk to you. I love a good royal revelation. That is Angela Levin. She's a royal biographer. You're watching and listening to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. More to come in the next hour. It's 5 o'clock. This is GB News, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get those latest news headlines.
Just after 5 o'clock, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Drivers are facing delays of up to 11 hours on their journeys as they hope to travel through the port of Dover. Although the number of French border staff has now improved, Dover authorities say there's still some way to go to clear the backlog. One French politician claims the delays are a result of Brexit, as more checks need to be carried out than before. However, Dover MP Nathalie Elphicke says France is responsible.
The French didn't turn up to work as they were expected to do in the numbers that were needed, and that resulted in that traffic gridlock in Dover and that traffic chaos that we saw right across Kent. So the French were responsible for the mess yesterday. I understand that they are now manning the passport controls properly at Dover, which is good news, but it will take some time yet to clear through that traffic backlog.
The World Health Organization has declared monkeypox is now a global health emergency. The organization warns the global risk to people is moderate, but in Europe it's high. Today's announcement means the WHO believes a coordinated international response is needed. The WHO's Director General says this outbreak can be contained.
Although I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern, for the moment, this is an outbreak that's concentrated among men who have sex with men, especially those with multiple sexual partners. That means that this is an outbreak that can be stopped with the right strategies in the right groups.
Rishi Sunak says he'll put the UK on a crisis footing to tackle issues such as inflation if he becomes Prime Minister. Speaking in Grantham, the former Chancellor hit back at tax cuts announced by his rival Liz Truss, warning they could lead to further inflation. He also promised to tackle the NHS backlog, pledging to eliminate one-year waiting times by September 2024.
I'm the candidate in this contest who can say unequivocally the NHS will be safe in my hands. We face the worst NHS winter crisis in decades. Tackling the backlogs is the biggest public service emergency.
Meanwhile, Liz Truss is promising a red tape bonfire of all EU laws retained after Brexit if she becomes Prime Minister. The Tory leadership hopeful says she'll implement a review by the end of next year and scrap rules which hinder UK growth. Critics warn it could weaken workers' rights, but Ms Truss says it would encourage investment.
We need to help businesses grow. That's why I want to get rid of those regulations, remove red tape on hard-working businesses and farmers, drive the economy forward, but also keep taxes low. Because what I want to see is a country where hard work's rewarded.
The body of a man has been found in Essex after a 21-year-old went missing last week. Emergency services had been searching for a person last seen in the water close to Clacton Pier on Tuesday. Police say formal identification has not yet taken place and efforts are being made to contact his family. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's missile strikes on the port of Odessa show it will find ways to renege on yesterday's grain deal. The agreement is supposed to allow the export of grain from Ukraine, easing global food shortages. The country currently has around 20 million tonnes stuck in silos. It follows months of Russia blockading Ukraine's ports in the Black Sea. And a pizza delivery driver in the United States has been praised after rescuing 5 people from a burning house. Nick Bostic was driving in Lafayette in Indiana when he saw the property ablaze. He managed to help 4 people escape the flames before going back in to rescue a 6-year-old girl. Incredibly, the pair only sustained minor injuries despite being forced to jump from a first-floor window. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it is yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. But joining me today is Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson and also broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Still to come, in a few moments, it's time for my difficult conversation. I'll look at why millions of people around the world are going plastic-free this month. And the campaigns officer at the Marine Conservation Society will join me in the studio to talk about the impact plastic is having on society and the environment across the world. And for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we scrap the NHS in favour of private healthcare? Now, a new report has found that UK health spending is costing around about £10,000 per household. Now, that is probably more than any private medical cover, and with the 3rd highest share of GDP in Europe. And despite the costs, the health service faces record waiting lists, and 250,000 people are paying for their own private healthcare in any case. So I'm asking, should we scrap the NHS in favour of private healthcare? And could Boris Johnson be stepping down as Prime Minister, but could that be short-lived? I'll be joined by the former advisor to Boris Johnson, Tim Montgomery, who says that he's got some insight into the Prime Minister's future plans. Not one to miss. Stay tuned. You can email gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Now, imagine a world without plastic. I'm thinking the credit card type. It's difficult, isn't it? The material is used in almost 301 million everyday items, from bags to food packaging. It creates 2.1 million tonnes of waste a year. So this July, millions of people around the world have committed to go plastic-free to help return the waste in the planet. So I'm joined now by Ella Dyche. She's the campaigns officer at the Marine Conservation Society. Ella, Is it possible to live without plastic? I'm thinking credit cards here. That's what I'm thinking. It's impossible. But seriously, though, plastic, it's pretty much everything. There's nothing here that hasn't got plastic in it, even my hair.
I mean, there's so much of it everywhere, even what we're wearing, you know, and I think the most important thing is that everyone does what they can. It's about more people doing it imperfectly than a few amount doing it perfectly. You know, we can all make changes in our daily lives that can really make a big difference.
Some people would say that who can be bothered to do that, frankly? I mean, it's a natural thing created by things in our environment, OK? So it's not something that's concocted. It's there. What is the real problem with it?
The real problem with it is the way that it's used. I mean, plastic is a great material, right, for some uses, but the problem is the way that it's being used by us. It's being used for a lot of single-use products, and that's a really big problem because we use them for a few seconds, a few hours, they're thrown away, and then they're ending up in landfill, they're polluting the ocean, or they're being incinerated.
But I heard about some plastic that it can biodegrade, because I thought the issue with plastic was that it takes literally light years to biodegrade, so it'll be there thousands and thousands of years hence, and because of that is an issue because there's no way of getting rid of it. But aren't they coming up with chemical types of plastic that can actually biodegrade? So if that is the case, what's the problem?
So yes, there are some kinds of plant-based plastic that you might have heard of, and whilst they're a great alternative, the issue is that they actually need to be industrially composted to compost effectively, right? We can't just put them in our home compost. We have to do that industrially, and we haven't got the capacity to do that in the UK at the moment. So unfortunately, a lot of the compostable plastic, biodegradable plastic, is actually ending up in landfill and being incinerated as well.
But wouldn't you be better off spending your time then sort of focusing on it? Because if you're going to be involved in this, wouldn't you be better off sort of focusing on trying to get this compostable plastic more widespread so that whilst, yes, we shouldn't, we should try not to use plastic, but if there's a way of biodegrading it so it doesn't cause the problem to the environment, then why isn't the focus on that, or is the focus on that?
It depends on the kind of product that it is, because, I mean, we have so many plastic bottles and, you look in your bathroom and there's so much plastic, and we can cut down on a lot of that. There's a lot that we don't actually need. And it can actually be more affordable as well. If you buy a plastic bottle of soap, yeah, it comes in plastic and it's actually more expensive than most soap bars. And then you're cutting out the bottle and you're also saving money at the same time.
I think we should have a little video in your own house so we can see how much plastic you've got rid of, Ella.
Are you serious? I'm not perfect.
So you've
at
got...
all. I'm not perfect, yeah. And that's the thing, It's about focusing on what you can do. I mean, sometimes I might go on the train and I've forgotten my reusable water bottle, but it's about trying, right? It's about doing as much as we can, because I think, the state of the planet as it is at the moment, and, you're seeing all the time, whales washing up on beaches, seals with rings round their necks,
No.
And there's so much that we can actually do to prevent that. So by taking part in the Marine Conservation Society's Plastic Challenge, you can not be overwhelmed by it, but try to do your little bit every month,
Well, I do. I try and do my bit. I try and get the carrier, the bag for life. But unfortunately, I often leave it in my car. It's very annoying. I'm like, the bag for life, oh, God, the bag for the car. It's in the car. Or the bag for life is meant to be in my handbag. Oh, So in the end, we all started off with good intentions with that. But I'm seeing people, even sometimes I go to a shop and I have so many things. I'm not going to spend 5p on a bag, or 20p now. I'm not going to do that. And I will do my best with that in my mind. So that has happened. But I still think the emphasis is on the wrong thing. If we can make plastic so it biodegrades, so that, and also focus people's energy on, using plastic more than once, that would be a good scenario. So I'm not understanding why the energy and emphasis isn't there.
It's because there's so much plastic is derived from fossil fuels, right?
Oh, right.
And yes, that is a major issue, because throughout, so say you've got a bottle of water, it's made of fossil fuels, but when it was produced, it's used fossil fuels to make it. Then the transport of that to the shop is using fossil fuels. Like, we're using so much of that just for one plastic bottle.
Do you think that it's impossible then? Because they're saying, get rid of fossil fuels and all this thing, and we're not going to use them anymore. We're going to use something different sort of energy. But we're talking about energy, but we're not talking about fossil fuels in things like plastic and fossil fuels in all the other things. If you say that that's how it's done, we're talking about, we just won't use the oil or whatever, or, Vladimir Putin's oil, or won't. But we will still be making plastic with fossil fuel, right?
Well, the most important thing is that we as everyday individual people try to do our best. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do. And yes, we need industry change, we need government change, we need legislation brought in to make sure that it's as easy as possible for everyone to do it, because it can be so confusing. As an individual, you go into the supermarket, what's the best product to buy? I've bought things thinking in the best intentions that it is eco-friendly. And unfortunately, there's a lot of greenwashing, there's a lot of claims from brands, and they're not all that they seem.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of rubbish, pardon the pun. But it is, it simply is. They tell you that it's eco-friendly when it isn't. So it's almost impossible, but I suppose that's the least we could do. Instead of plastic, what is the alternative?
So a great way of ditching plastic, for example, is by switching from bottled shampoo, conditioner, body wash to soap bars.
I thought you were going to say bottled champagne. Yes, I'm doing some of that now.
And also, it's summer. You might want a new summer dress. Instead of opting for fast fashion, try shopping secondhand on different, there's so much out there now. There's shops, there's also online apps. It's a great way of getting rid of that, it's a great way of changing your spending habits. And I'd just say for everybody to try their best, because every time you spend money, you're voting for the future that you want, right? So by spending better, you're doing better for our future. And even wet wipes, there's tons of wet wipes, right? 75% of the stuff that we found on the Great British Beach Clean last year was plastic, and 6% was wet wipes and period products.
Oh, God, that's just vile.
Because people flush them down the toilet.
And then they end up on...
They end up in our beaches, they end up in our waterways, rivers. They get there through flushing, but they'll also contain a lot of plastic. So, people can change what they're using on their period. They can opt for eco-friendly tampons and pads.
Can we not talk about this? I sound like a man who doesn't want to talk about... No, but I hear you, though. We could use more eco-friendly products and things.
Yeah.
OK, so if somebody watching now or listening now will be thinking, I just want to do something to help out with the fact that we're using so much plastic, are there 5 tips that you could give us, some things we could kind of... things we could exchange instead, or different ways of behaving?
Yeah, of course. So what I'd first suggest is getting involved with our plastic challenge. Have a look around your house, have a look in your cupboard, look at the things that you can switch first, and don't get too overwhelmed by it. It's so easy when confronted by these massive problems to really go into an abyss, right? You just got to try and start with what you can switch, and that's the most important thing. So, try a reusable water bottle, try washable makeup wipes instead of disposable makeup wipes. Try all these different things, see what works for you. I'd say, again, shop secondhand. Get involved with our beach cleans. We're doing the Great British Beach Clean this year. It's just launched. It's going to be happening in September. And our beach cleans are a little bit different, because when we're actually taking the litter off the beach, we're auditing it as well, and that data then gets used to lobby government and industry to bring about change.
You're exhausting me. I'm thinking about cleaning my house, cleaning the beach. I'm thinking, oh, but I hear you.
Yeah, it's just about doing what you can, and who doesn't want to be part of positive change?
Well, and 2 more tips, go on then. That was 3.
2 more, right? I'd say if you can, walk or cycle to work is a great option, especially if you're in a city. And then also, again, I'm going to talk about periods. Try reusable period products like menstrual cups, period pants. There's so much out there to try. But yeah, just do what you can.
I shouldn't have got those last two. Ella, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, we could all do our own thing, couldn't we, to try and improve the situation, because it's not good. Manufacturers also need to step up to the challenge, I think.
Oh, 100%.
Just to give us your website if people want to find out more.
Yeah, it's www.mcsuk.org.
Thank you so much. That's Ella Dye. She's a campaigns officer for the Marine Conservation Society. Right, well, coming up, it is time for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should we scrap the NHS in favour of private medical cover? Now, a new report has found UK health spending is costing about £10,000 per household, with the third highest share of GDP in Europe. And that's despite the cost the health service faces record waiting lists, and 250,000 people are paying for their own private healthcare in any case. So I'm asking, should we scrap the NHS in favour of private healthcare? Let's get an update with your weather. We'll be back after this.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet across the north and west, but drier in the south and east. Let's take a look at the details. Scattered showers, which could be heavy at times, will move slowly eastwards across southwest England as we head through the evening. Breezy with temperatures around 18 or 19 Celsius. A fine evening to come across southeast England with plenty of sunny spells. Feeling warm and humid with temperatures up in the low to mid-20s. Often cloudy across southern Wales with outbreaks of rain moving through. The rain could be heavy at times too. Breezy with temperatures around 19 Celsius. Increasing amounts of cloud across the Midlands this evening. It should remain mostly dry, but a few showers may move in across the west later. Temperatures hovering around 21 Celsius with light winds. Rather cloudy this evening across northeast England with just the odd spot of light rain possible. This mainly falling over the higher ground. Rather humid with temperatures sat in the low 20s of Celsius. A mostly cloudy evening to come across much of southern Scotland. Outbreaks of rain will move through on a brisky southerly breeze with temperatures at 18 or 19 degrees Celsius. A cloudy evening for Northern Ireland with some heavy rain moving across the country. Rather breezy too along eastern coast. Temperatures will range from 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. Outbreaks of rain will continue to move across the country as we head overnight, staying windy for western areas in particular. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Join us every Sunday at 10 a.m. for The Political Correction.
We're here to put you, the people, back in charge. Our debate is about all areas of the United Kingdom.
It's about what's really going on in our country.
It's about you. So please get in touch and tell us what you think.
Don't miss it. It's The Political Correction every Sunday at 10 a.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
So 23 minutes after 5 o'clock, it's fast approaching. If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. You can also stream the show live on YouTube and catch up on the GB News app. Now, it is time for our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should we scrap the NHS in favour of private healthcare? A major report has found that UK health spending is costing, now listen to this, roughly £10,000 per household, which is actually the third highest share of GDP in Europe. Now, this report by the think tank Civitas also found that the outcomes of our system are some of the worst in the developed world. And I know this because my dad, he lives in this country, but he actually went back to Ghana to get his treatment because it just wasn't happening here in the UK. Now, it also seems like patients are already turning to private healthcare because of the long waiting lists. We've all experienced them. There were 69,000 self-funded treatments in the UK in the final 3 months of last year, and that is a 39% rise in the same period before the pandemic. So what do you think? Should we scrap the NHS in favour of private healthcare? Even if it came out of our taxes and became private, it would look like it would probably cost less. Right, I'm joined by research fellow at the Bow Group, Benjamin Loughnane. Benjamin, I saw that and I thought... Benjamin, why do you think that private healthcare would work better than the current system? I mean, do you think that?
Well, I think that, you don't need to necessarily have either private or national healthcare. You can have a national healthcare system which is funded by taxpayer money, which is free at the point of delivery and yet has an element of privatisation within it, within how the contracts are tendered. So you have competition, which drives more, better efficiency and progress so that people, have that sense of competing against each other rather than having the rather sclerotic state of nationalised healthcare where there is none of that. And you have this glutted middle management system where all the money is going into these management positions and not onto frontline services. You saw during the pandemic, for example, we had billions, I think, in defective PPE that was just simply thrown away because it was bought and it was out of date and it couldn't be used. And things like that wouldn't, I don't think, happen in the private sector. So if you get a bit of that private sector sense of competition and efficiency into the NHS, it can still be free at the point of delivery, but you get better value for taxpayer money.
How will it be free at the point of delivery, though, if you're saying that it could be sort of a private system?
Well, what I mean to say is that it's funded by taxpayers. So in that sense, the funding comes out of tax. And when people need it, they can go and they don't have to pay a bill for their healthcare. However, the providers who are providing that healthcare would be private companies rather than a vast nationalised system which falls under the state.
But Benjamin, you know how this goes. It starts off at a very reasonable price, and it starts off perfectly realistic, and then suddenly Benjamin's morphing into something very strange. Listen, if you're watching on TV, you'll see it happening. If you're listening already, you won't, so you might want to quickly have a look on YouTube. He's returned. He still looks the same. Yeah. Benjamin, I was going to ask you, so what do you think then? Because you know how it goes. It starts off at a perfectly reasonable price, and then suddenly it starts to escalate, and the cost then supersedes anything that you've ever seen in your lives. And that is often the system that happens with a private system that is funded by the state. There is no limit to what it will charge.
Yeah, I'm not sure what just happened to my picture there. I think my Wi-Fi is being sabotaged by the left-wing elite who don't want to hear the truth about the NHS. No, yes, on the one hand, that is true, that when you allow privatisation into the system, it might start out reasonable and then change. But that's one of the benefits of privatisation, is that if a provider starts to charge too much, you can go to another provider who will charge a more reasonable price. They'll get undercut on price. Whereas with a nationalised system, when you have one provider, if they start to jack up the prices or they're less efficient and their costs go up as a result, you have no other option. You've got to go with it because you've got one provider and that's it. And the other problem with this as well is that, we start out by saying, maybe we can reform the NHS a little bit. The suspicion is that if we change anything, we're going to scrap the NHS altogether. And as a result, the NHS has become a sacred cow and people are too scared to get to grips with the problems with it.
Well, do you know, that's very fascinating that you say that. I hadn't actually thought of that concept of doing it like that, but that is an interesting way of structuring it if it did that. Very, very quickly, because we're running out of time with you, do other countries really do healthcare better than us?
Well, it's not so much that they have better healthcare, it's that every country is different. So you've got different populations, different population densities. You have more healthy populations. You have different systems which appeal to different nations. It's a part of a greater framework of a culture. So, yeah, there are countries you can point to, such as Switzerland, for example, where the healthcare is better. But that's because they've got a far lower tax burden and people can afford those systems much more easily because of the way that our country is.
So they're not really comparable. Yeah, Benjamin, listen, I'm running out of time, but I love your ideas, though. That's Benjamin Lougane. I think I said Loughnane, I've got it. Benjamin, thank you very much. He's a research fellow at the Bow Group. We'll have to speak to him again because I love these ideas. I'm also joined by an NHS doctor, Tolu Adepeju. Dr. Tolu, what do you think? Why are you against the idea of it being privatised? You heard there's a great idea from Benjamin that it would be a private organisation. The money would be funded by the taxpayer, but you'd get a better system because we wouldn't be spending a fortune on those managers at the top that you see in the NHS, and it wouldn't be almost like we've got you sort of thing.
I mean, it does sound like a good idea, to be perfectly honest with you. But the problem with that is, like I think Benjamin actually said, is that you then go onto that slippery slope again of if you have competition between providers, then they set the price technically. What if the price is too high and not everyone can pay that? Then the people who essentially are less fortunate are going to be the ones that pay, which obviously defeats the purpose of having an NHS that's free at the point of need, unfortunately.
But Dr. Tolu, I think his idea was that it would be free at the point of need, the money would come out from the taxpayer's purse, and then it would be then distributed to private companies and the competition would mean that you could choose the provider. So therefore, they would have to be competitive because the problem with the other system is that it's costing around about, I mean, this is just from the research, about £10,000 a household for the NHS service, when actually I used to have private medical cover that I paid for, and it was about when I was very young, it was very cheap, but then as I became sicker and older, it got more expensive. But it's only over £200 a month, which is no way £10,000 a year for one person. So if it was a bigger household, the cost could be similar, wouldn't it?
I mean, like I said, it is a very good point, but the problem with creating competition in healthcare, and obviously this is something that in the UK we don't really have. We don't really think about healthcare as something that requires competition. I do understand what he means in terms of because you have one provider, if one provider isn't fulfilling the service, you essentially have nowhere else to go. Obviously, that's the current system we have in NHS at the moment, but there is some competition in the NHS because with regards to GPs, you can go to a private GP. You don't have to go to an NHS GP. And GPs, essentially, they compete for contracts with private hospitals as well. So that's something that does happen. There is a little bit of competition currently in the NHS. But the problem is, you go to a private healthcare centre and you get good care. You get private healthcare at the cost of the NHS. But then the problem is that then starts to get really expensive. It becomes expensive for taxpayers. Because at the end of the day, now we've increased national insurance by a certain percentage because we need more money for the NHS. What happens when you create competition? That competition gets out of hand.
And I suppose the other side of that is that the more expensive procedures will be very unpopular. So you might find that they'll only cover the things where they can make a higher profit margin on, rather than the things that are that don't. So I don't know how that would be policed and how you'd make sure that each provider offered extensive service. That could be a problem there as well. But the report shows that the health system in our country is literally the most expensive in Europe and the most inefficient. I mean, what reforms do you think that they could make to potentially make that work then, if you think that we should continue in the same vein that we're in now?
I think we need to start looking at cost management because this is something that isn't really discussed in NHS. We don't really talk about cost management. We don't talk about how much it costs to use certain equipment. We don't talk about trying to save equipment. We don't really talk about things like that because obviously, for as long as I've known the NHS personally, it's all been free. Even providing care has been free. You don't really we don't talk about cost. We don't talk about how much things cost. So when we're doing investigations, we're pretty, I'd say, liberal with what we're requesting, what we're spending. I'd say we need to be a little bit more looking at are these scans necessary? Are these scans, do we have to do these scans? Is there a cheaper way we can do it? This is something that we actually don't talk about in the NHS at the moment.
Interesting. I'd rather they spent the money on scans and just got rid of all those managers above there. They're on over 100 grand a year, like net zero managers. I'd like to see them gone. Dr. Tolu Adepeju, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. Thanks for your views. He's an NHS doctor. Well, let's have a quick sneaky peek at what you've been saying about this. Alex says that we shouldn't scrap the NHS, but there needs to be huge audits to see where the money's going, because the question was that is it time we sort of scrap the NHS in favour of private medical cover? Gary says, no, invest in the NHS. I lived in the US for 20 years. The healthcare system does not work there. The NHS is still the best, just underfunded. I would beg to differ. I think it's overfunded and very badly spent. Nick says there are lots of very successful European models to copy. The Prime Minister needs to say the NHS doesn't work. We're going to exactly copy the German or Dutch or French system. I agree. There are lots of different ways of doing the same thing, Nick. It's really good to talk to you. Thank you for your views. Keep them coming. If you just joined me, welcome. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue with our Great British Debate this hour. I'd love for you to get involved. I'm asking, should we scrap the NHS in favour of private medical health care? A new report has found UK health spending is costing about £10,000 per household. That's with the third highest share of GDP in Europe. So wouldn't it be cheaper to just go private? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel Conservative commentator, Reverend Calvin Robinson, and also broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. I'll also speak to an American writer to find out how the system there works and whether it could be implemented here in the UK. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Ray.
Thanks, Nana. It's 5:33. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Drivers are facing delays of up to 11 hours as they try to travel through the port of Dover. Although the number of French border staff has been increased, authorities say there's still some way to go to clear the backlog. One French politician claims the delays are a result of Brexit, as more checks need to be carried out than before. The World Health Organization has now declared that monkeypox is a global health emergency. The organization's Director General warns the global risk to people is moderate. However, in Europe, it's high. Today's announcement means the WHO believes a coordinated international response is needed. Rishi Sunak says he will put the UK on a crisis footing to tackle issues, including inflation, if he becomes Prime Minister. Speaking in Grantham, the former Chancellor hit back at tax cuts planned by his rival Liz Truss, warning they could lead to further inflation. He also promised to tackle the NHS backlog, pledging to eliminate one-year waiting times by September 2024. Liz Truss is promising a red tape bonfire of all EU laws retained after Brexit if she becomes PM. The Foreign Secretary says she'll implement a review by the end of next year and scrap rules which hinder UK growth. She's arguing that the measures would encourage business investment, but critics say it might weaken workers' rights. And the Foreign Secretary has condemned Russia's attack on Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa and says not a word President Vladimir Putin says can be trusted. It came just hours after Moscow and Kyiv signed deals to allow grain exports to resume from the southern city. The country currently has around 20 million tonnes in silos, causing fears of a global food shortage. Ms. Truss says a solution must be found that doesn't involve Russia and their broken promises. On TV, online and on DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Back to Nana Akua in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome on board. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Right, it is, of course, time for our Great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should we scrap the NHS in favour of private healthcare? A major report has found that UK health spending is amongst the most expensive and the least effective in the developed world. I think I could have told you that. The report by think tank Civitas found that the NHS costs roughly £10,000 per household, which is the third highest share of GDP in Europe. Britain also had the second worst life expectancy of the 19 wealthy countries included in the research. So I'm asking, should we scrap the NHS in favour of private medical cover? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robertson and also broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Right, Calvin, private medical cover. I don't know whether you've got it or not. I paid for it. If you're young and healthy, do it now.
I don't have private medical cover, but when I need to see a doctor, I go to a pay-as-you-go private, because I think that if you can afford to go private, you should. I think the NHS should be a safety net for people that can't afford it. We pay about £3,000 per year per person on the NHS. Now, private premiums are about half that. So actually, it'd be more cost-effective for most people to go private. And I do think that it gets a bit disingenuous whenever every time we raise this conversation, people go, well, it doesn't work in America. The American system is rubbish. It does not work in America. But that is not the only alternative option. As Nick on Twitter pointed out earlier, there are many, many different models in Europe, and I think we should be looking at what they're doing, because we spend far too much. It's what, £170 billion per year, and that's up 50 billion from last year. We can't be spending this much money forever.
Well, and it's quite irritating as well when they're spending 12 grand a pop for rainbow crossings and also net zero managers and all that, or diversity and inclusion characters for up to 100 grand. It does actually stick in my craw, Lizzie.
Well, the core premise of the NHS is actually sound. But it's the administration, it's the high cost of management, as we've talked about. But the thing that worries me, it's become this toxic political football for many years. And so if an MP even sort of criticises the NHS, you know, you're going to get loads of grief from the party about it. That's the
a fair
trouble.
point. And credit to Civitas for actually being brave enough to research this.
Yeah, exactly, and I agree with that. But I just think that we've got massive waiting lists. You know, and I know since the pandemic, the NHS is not living with COVID. It's literally dying from it, and there's got to be something done. It's in a real mess.
Well, I'm just of the opinion that too much money's been spent in it, and it's very top-heavy, with a load of people who have no real idea or any real medical kind of qualifications, doing jobs that probably could be done, but don't really need to be done. And if it were a private organisation, it would never be run like that. And I think that either... And I really like the idea that out of your taxes, there is a private element to that you get your services and you can choose your providers. But the only thing I see about that is that there'll be a gap. So the things that are not profitable won't be looked at. So, for example, if you do go to a private place and you get things done there, if it goes wrong, you end up in an NHS facility. But I think that could be a standard model, that we start off private, and then if it's something that is covered by the NHS, it could be that. Because I just don't see it's just so expensive, £10,000 a household. I mean, what are they spending it on?
It's just so awful. A friend of mine's got a crippling back, and we've actually done a collection so he can go and get his back sorted privately. And this is what people are doing. They're dipping into their savings. They're getting collections to try and get their operations done because the waiting lists are so huge. And I know waiting lists have always been around, but they are just, it's mad now. And to think every minute you're in agony and pain and nothing can be done.
Well, listen, Calvin, you mentioned the American system. You said it doesn't work, so let's find out how it does work in America. And I'm going to speak to American writer Yaron Brook. Yaron, thank you very much for joining me. Calvin said the system doesn't work in America. So how exactly does it work?
Well, there's a lot of truth to what Calvin says. The problem with the American system is there's too much government involvement in it. You don't want to mimic the American system. What you want is true privatization. I disagree with your panelist in the sense that the NHS is a good idea, but is not practiced well. No, it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea to central plan any industry. Do we want the government manufacturing our food? Can you imagine what a disaster that would be? Well, when the government starts, in a sense, manufacturing our healthcare, it's a disaster. You get that in the NHS. You get it, I think, to a smaller degree in the United States.
Well, the American system, though, does come under a lot of criticism, actually. Former President Obama, he implemented a system like the NHS, but for only the poorest people. And there was quite a lot of backlash against it, even from the poorest people. Has that made a difference? Is it still running now? Have they scrapped it? What's gone on with that?
No, he made it worse. Obamacare made things worse, not better. It made it much more expensive for most of us to get our health care. The American system, look, if you have insurance in the United States, and insurance is too expensive because of government regulations and government controls and government mandates. But if you have insurance in the United States, then you are getting the best healthcare in the world. I mean, the fact is that when a European, if a wealthy European gets sick, really sick, they don't go to France, they don't go to Switzerland, they don't go to Sweden. They fly to the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic. They fly to the United States to get treatment, because the fact is that we get amazing treatment here. Now, it's true that a certain percentage of Americans don't have health insurance, and that is a real problem. But the problem there is that regulations and controls and government intervention drive up the cost of insurance primarily for poor people, and that can be solved if there's a political will to solve it. But that requires more freedom, less government intervention, less regulation, not the other way around.
Interesting stuff. So do you think that the people in America are envious of our NHS? There was a time when it was the envy of the world.
No, I don't think anybody's envious of the NHS anywhere in the world. I mean, I know it's kind of religion in the UK to believe in the NHS. You can't criticize it. But the fact is you have one of the worst healthcare systems in the developed world. Many of your European neighbors do much better than you do. And the fact is, again, that I think when you have insurance, if you have insurance in the United States, you get far better treatment. So, and then, you talk about waiting lists and waiting lines. I want to get an MRI. I can get an MRI tomorrow, paid for by insurance. If I want to go see a doctor, I can see him almost immediately. If there's an emergency, everything is available to me if I have insurance. So the American health system is far superior, but it's not ideal. We could make it a lot better. And if you were restructuring your system, if you were going to redo the NHS, you could do a lot better than the American system. But the principle is the more you privatize, the better. So, and the ideal is privatize everything.
Yeah, Yaron Brook, thank you very much. I like the sound of that. Writer and podcaster. Yaron seems to think privatise everything. Let's have a quick chat to my panel, Lizzie Cundy and also Reverend Calvin Robinson. I agree with what he's saying. I think he's right. I do agree when you said that, you like the premise of it. I don't like the premise of the NHS. I think that we are deluding ourselves in thinking because it's free, you're going to get a decent service. I think that if people paid for it, first of all, they'd value it. But secondly, if it was paid for by the public, but from the public person, in a sense, I suppose, then it would be more litigious. So if something goes wrong, there would be a potential to sue people, so that there wouldn't be any of that nonsense either. And that is more in the American vein.
Yeah. Well, I just was going to say I think the American health system demonstrates the worst in capitalism. capitalism, to be honest, and I don't agree with what he says. I just think our NHS, we need to just get the serious management sorted, that side, take the politics out, maybe managed under a Royal Commission or something, there's a thought, but just get it back on track and get away, you know, they've got away with the high cost of management that isn't working to sort this out, and urgently. But
I just think we have to remember that it's not free. It costs over £300 million per day, and people moan about spending money on things like the monarchy. The monarchy covers about 17 hours worth of NHS spending. The Rwanda flight cost about 90 seconds worth of NHS spending, and the Ukraine support that we've spent so far costs about 2.7 days of NHS spending. We're spending far too much money on the NHS. It's not working. We need to find another way.
I think any politician who comes in and flips that around and fixes that will be the politician. Liz Truss, if you're listening now, if you fix that, then you know what? I think that you're on to a winner there. But this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice onto the show. Your opportunity to tell us what you think about what we're discussing. Where should we go? Ooh, let's go to Watford.
I like Watford.
Yeah, let's have a chat
football
with...
club.
Yeah, let's have a chat with David Baum. David, welcome to the programme. What do you make...
Thank you.
So what do you think, then? Is it time to scrap the NHS in favour of private healthcare?
Well, there's an argument to say, yeah, everyone should write, but actually it could be a hybrid method where the basics of emergency is paid for by the NHS and treatment then goes out to a panel of suppliers. But what no one wants to address is the millions of pounds that are owed to the NHS from treatments that are not being paid for, by prescriptions not being paid for, because people scarper. And when you try it, I've done this for many years, worked for NHS Trust, we were being hampered by the rules of the management about what we could and couldn't do to collect money. And in the end, it's just not viable to do that. So they need to look at the management of it straight away and say, what the hell are you doing? You're not managing anything correctly. It's causing more problems. And we have to start looking at this as not as a sacred cow, but as a service that needs to function correctly.
Yeah, David, I hear you. Thank you very much, David Baum. He is our great British voice. Right, well, that's it. That's the thoughts. So keep your thoughts coming. But we'll move on to another story that caught my eye today. The former advisor to Boris Johnson, Tim Montgomery, says that he's been told by sources close to the Prime Minister that he believes he'll be back, hasta la vista, baby, in office within the next 12 months. It comes as a row broke out among senior Conservatives about the campaign among party members to allow them a vote on whether Mr Johnson should continue as Prime Minister. Now, by last night, that petition was up to 7,600 members, all of whom have given their membership numbers and have signed a petition calling for a vote. So I'm going to speak to Tim Montgomery now. Tim, how reliable are these sources, really? Hasta la vista, will he be back?
Hello, Nana. How are you? It's great to be on your programme. Well, look, I think my sources are very reliable, and I don't think probably you or your fellow panellists there will be that surprised. We saw the Prime Minister, still the Prime Minister for the moment, on Wednesday at his last Prime Minister's Question Time, talking about that's it for now. And, you know, he's glad that what he's largely accomplished. And, you know, he's been forced out, and personally, I don't think he will return or should return. But no, I'm not sure that he is persuaded of that view.
Yeah, because a lot of people think that he'll walk away from politics into the sunset. That sounds like you think that's what he might do. But what do you make of the members who are now calling on him to stay?
Well, look, I think, look, I'm not particularly satisfied with the choice of the last two for the country between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. I'll vote for Liz Truss, but I'll do so reluctantly. I think it would have been a much more exciting contest if, for example, we'd had Kemi Badenoch and Tom Tugendhat in the final two. And then, so the members, I think, are unhappy about that. And then I think they saw Boris Johnson's performance on Wednesday, bravura performance, and thought, have we made a terrible mistake? But I think over time, they'll remember that taxes are at a record level under Boris Johnson. Immigration isn't under control. You've just been talking about, Nana, the problems in the NHS. They aren't being faced up to. Brexit hasn't really been taken advantage of.
Oh, God, Tim,
so
no more.
Boris Johnson is entertaining, I'm not sure he really was giving us a particularly good premiership. So I don't think there'll be much buyer's remorse in due course.
Really. Thank you very much, Tim. Lovely to speak to you. That's Tim Montgomery. He's the former advisor to Boris Johnson. Quickly return to my panel, Calvin Robinson and also Lizzie Cundy. Boris, hasta la vista. He used the Arnie voice. Do you think he'll be back? Yes or no?
I'm still not convinced he's actually going to go.
He's hanging around.
And I think that the membership are clearly underwhelmed by the candidate selection, so they should get a choice to vote for him if they want to keep him on.
Lizzie, briefly.
No, he's going. I'm sorry, he's lost the confidence and moral authority, and he has to go. But he didn't say those words at the end. I'll be back, but I bet he will be.
Well, he used the Arnie voice, and Arnie did say hasta la vista as well. But right, it is time for our quick fire quiz. It's the part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other stories that are hitting the headlines right now. Joining me, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Calvin, press your buzzer now. And also, we've got broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Your buzzer, please. Right, let's... brilliant. Right, so remember, the rules are please play along at home. Anybody who buzzes before I finish the question is immediately eliminated from that particular one. All right, so here we go. First question. Why did Google fire one of their engineers? Was it A, he claimed that Google's technology isn't as good as its competitors? B, he said the company's AI system has feelings? Or C, he hacked the Google Assistant? Calvin.
I'm going to go with C.
And I'll give you a chance, Lizzie, to answer.
I was going with A.
You're going to go with A. The answer is B, actually. Neither of you. I love it when that happens. Nil point. He said that the company's AI system has feelings.
What?
Yes, really.
That's very odd.
So, yes, Google fired an engineer last month after he had said that the company's language technology was capable of feelings, you nutter. Since then, the tech giant has slammed the former employee, claiming his comments were wholly unfounded. So, briefly, Lizzie and Calvin, do you think that computers and things, AI has feelings?
No. I am worried about the time when they do.
Exactly, very much so.
I'll be very worried when it does, but I then won't need a man. No, I'm joking. On to question number 2. How long has Justin Welby served as the Archbishop of Canterbury? Closest answer wins. Calvin.
Too long. 11 years.
Lizzie.
I'm going for 10.
She's going for 10. Ooh, I'm afraid it's Lizzie. She's got it right.
I think he's been a bishop for 11 years.
Fair enough. Well, Justin Welby has almost been in the position for a decade and is set to complete 10 years next spring. The retirement age of a member of the clergy is 70 years old. He's currently 66. Calvin, should he continue until he retires?
No comment.
We'll just take the no bit. OK.
He's got to go. I want him to go.
You want him to go?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I want him to go as well. Right, question 3, which is a true or false. Former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn is reportedly considering to run for Mayor of London. True or false? Calvin.
True.
False.
I hope he does.
You think it's...
False.
You hope he does?
Yeah, that'll be a good campaign.
Please don't.
I'd like to see him run against Sean Bailey. He will lose. Right, the answer is actually true. Jeremy Corbyn's supporters have been urging the former Labour leader to run for mayor as a way to return to the position of power.
Oh, no. Father, can we say a prayer quickly?
I know, he's fantastic at losing.
Can I also tell you, Charlie Mullins, who used to own Pimlico Plumbers, is running as well.
Is he?
Did you know?
Really?
Yes.
Well, who would you want then? Would you want Jeremy Corbyn?
Sean Bailey.
Sean Bailey, what about you?
Neither, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I hope he does run because he will lose, yes. So basically, the idea is back-to-back the opposition leader, Sir Keir Starmer, who removed the whip from Corbyn over his response to the anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. So whether he should run it or not is your opinion. I don't think he should. My panel don't think he should either. But let's talk about today's show, because we've been asking whether we should scrap the NHS in favour of private healthcare. And according to our Twitter poll, 44% of you say yes, 56% of you say no. Really? I think they should go. Right, thank you so much to my panel, not them. Calvin Robinson. Calvin, it's been a pleasure as ever.
Pleasure is mine.
And also Lizzie Cundy, thank you very much for joining me, Lizzie. And as ever, a big thank you to you at home for your company. Now, I will be back tomorrow to discuss the top stories at 4. Joining me then will be Andrew Pearce and also Danny Kelly. So, as ever, don't forget you can catch up with the show via the GB News app, or why not check us out on YouTube. I'll see you tomorrow at 4. Enjoy. Take care.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet across the north and west, but drier in the south and east. Let's take a look at the details. Scattered showers, which could be heavy at times, will move slowly eastwards across southwest England as we head through the evening. Breezy with temperatures around 18 or 19 Celsius. A fine evening to come across southeast England with plenty of sunny spells. Feeling warm and humid with temperatures up in the low to mid-20s. Often cloudy across southern Wales with outbreaks of rain moving through. The rain could be heavy at times too. Breezy with temperatures around 19 Celsius. Increasing amounts of cloud across the Midlands this evening. It should remain mostly dry, but a few showers may move in across the west later. Temperatures hovering around 21 Celsius with light winds. Rather cloudy this evening across northeast England with just the odd spot of light rain possible. This mainly falling over the higher ground. Rather humid with temperatures sat in the low 20s of Celsius. A mostly cloudy evening to come across much of southern Scotland. Outbreaks of rain will move through on a brisky southerly breeze with temperatures at 18 or 19 degrees Celsius. A cloudy evening for Northern Ireland with some heavy rain moving across the country. Rather breezy too along eastern coast. Temperatures will range from 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. Outbreaks of rain will continue to move across the country as we head overnight, staying windy for western areas in particular. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good evening. Welcome along to Neil Oliver Live on GB News TV and on radio. Tonight on the programme, I'll be talking about the problems facing farmers and not through any fault of their own. And I will also discuss the ongoing protests in the Netherlands. It's been another week of bad publicity for the BBC. We'll be discussing the fallout and asking what the future holds. My Great Britain this week is John Di Benedetto, a former Royal Marines commando who's preparing for an extreme fitness challenge to raise money for charity. All of that and plenty of discussion with my guests, Emma Sale and Emma Burnell. But first, an update on the latest news from Ray Addison.
Thanks, Neil. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Drivers are facing delays of up to 11 hours as they try to travel through the port of Dover. Although the number of French border staff has now been increased, Dover authorities say there's still some way to go to clear the backlog. One French politician claims the delays are a result of Brexit, as more checks need to be carried out than before. However, travel journalist Simon Calder agrees with that.
your passport, which you probably turned up there before if you sailed out of Dover. You kind of wave it at the French passport checks, which of course are done on this side of the channel. That's all stopped. It's an external frontier of the European Union now in Kent. As a result of that, they have to look. They have to check your passport is compliant. They have to stamp it. They have to see if you've been in the EU for more than 90 days in the last 180 days. Those are all the rules that we asked to be applied to us. They are nothing to do with the EU introducing new rules. We said, yes, those are the rules we'd like, please.
The World Health Organization has declared monkeypox is now a global health emergency. The organization warns the global risk to people is moderate, but in Europe it's high. Today's announcement means the WHO believes a coordinated international response is needed. Director General of the WHO says this outbreak can be contained.